think about it, every device that we're putting out on our grid today, whether it's a pull-top switch, their fault indicators, everything has operational technology in it today. So all of that is reporting back to our ADMS systems, our advanced distribution management systems. It almost starts to feel like a central power plant, the way you're managing your grid today, just because of the technology that's out on the grid. And all that technology is designed to help our customers. Some of that really excites me, some of it also concerns me. It excites me because I should be able to tell the customers what's happening at the same time they're experiencing it. If they're having an outage or if they're having some type of issue, I should be able to understand what's happening on their system. Or better yet, I should be able to proactively look at a series of data points to understand what's going to happen to a transformer in their neighborhood. I should be able to predict in a much better way than I can today what's actually going to happen on the grid and proactively repair it before something happened. The downside to that is today I have labor that I need. Well, a lot of that labor looks like an overhead lineman or an underground lineman. In the future, it's going to be SCADA engineers. It's going to be IT engineers who can go out and make sure that all the devices are still repeating. Cybersecurity is only going to continue to become a bigger and bigger opportunity, but it's something we need to really pay attention to because every device now is a potential way into our system for a bad actor. And there's a lot of bad actors out there. So who are your suppliers? What type of technology do they use? How closely you're working with your IT and your cybersecurity department when you're trying to choose devices you're putting on your grid. All of that is going to feel a lot different now with the age of technology and as fast as it's coming to us. Then the only other thing I'd say about technology is people can fall in love with shiny objects. Even with technology, the grid comes down to the meat and potatoes, right? Still got to trim trees. You still got to harden the system. You got to have new poles. So I think it's also, as we talk about this, what I try to remind everybody is the digital grid's going to be great, but at the end of the day, it's still wires and poles, and we've got to do the meat and potatoes of the grid really well, because that's how you give great reliability to customers. Everything else is an adder on top for the customers. I should be able to improve the customer experience. I should make them love what DTE is doing or other utilities should, based on the information I can provide them and the reactive nature with which I can fix things on the grid in the future. But I got to keep the lights on up front, right? You got to be able to do all that really well. I think probably the biggest challenge, and it's the opportunity to establishing the digital grid, is trying to help all of the stakeholders understand why you're moving down that path. And whether we're talking about regulators or regulator staffs, or whether you're talking about the Attorney General or anybody that intervenes in these regulatory matters, what you find is the regulatory process is, I describe it as inside baseball. It's not the average customer that's involved in this. And everybody comes in with a single point of view on one issue. Was the utility, I don't have the opportunity to worry about a single issue. I have to worry about all the issues as we try to decide this. So I think the challenge is trying to manage all of these competing priorities that people bring, and then trying to connect those in a way that we can continue to move forward. Everybody gets a little bit of what they want, but we can continue the progress of making the digital grid and improving the grid. That takes a lot of education. It takes a lot of smart people thinking about it strategically inside of our own shop. We can't have people just being tactical. We need people being very strategic, thinking about what we're doing, not in 2023, but what are we doing in 2026 and 2027? We need to be laying that roadmap out. So I think it's a challenge and an opportunity for us as we think about establishing the digital grid. I prefer to take on the opportunity piece, because if we do it right, our customers will be happier and we will lower costs for them, which that feels like a giant win for us.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, Trevor. I think there are a number of challenges, none of them that cannot be addressed, but infrastructure is a challenge, both physical as well as digital, right? So when we talk about physical infrastructure, the utility is going to have to provide increased capacity in certain areas or certain regions to address the growth in electric vehicle charging needs, right? So how do you do that? That means, feeder reinforcements, for example. So that's a physical infrastructure need. You talked about the devices in the field. I mean, that's going to require a robust communications network, right? To be able to handle many, many more devices that transmit data in real time, transmit it efficiently, securely, reliably. That requires an investment in communications infrastructure. Providing more meters so more people can participate in the energy equation. And then you have some digital infrastructure in terms of the management and monitoring systems that we've been talking about, the ADMS, Advanced Distribution Management Systems, or the distributed energy resource management systems. Those are systems that require a lot of investment. They take a long time. I know DTE is in the middle of implementing ADMS right now, and I've certainly seen it at a number of utilities where it's a journey. It takes a number of years, and it builds on each other, but you need the foundational layers. So those are investments that need to be made to really start realizing the digital grid. And I think utilities, and especially DTE as well, while it's on its way there.
Yeah, well, the one word that you used a couple times that I'll just come back at is investment. So it's interesting, most utilities in the country are shrinking, right? With the exception of a few utilities down south, the majority of us are seeing our load shrink year after year after year. So you have electrification coming, and if you look at all these plotted lines, it shows sometime in the 2028 to 2030 range, depending on what you believe, that electrification will actually start to exceed the current energy waste reduction programs we have. So utilities will start to grow again. The key is, how do you manage this investment between now and when you start to see that load growth happen at utilities? We made all this investment in the grids before, whether that's the physical grid or the digital grid, while we were growing. So there was very little pressure to the customers to fund it. Well, that's different today. Today, we need to not only make the investments, we need to immediately show benefits to the customer, because it's showing up on their bills. It's more rate pressure on the customers, or bill pressure on the customers, as we make these investments. Electrification is going to really help, but the dream of electrification and really that load growth is 2028 to 2030, depending on the scenario you believe. So I think the other trick to implementing the digital grid, or not the trick, but the other challenge, is how do we do it and keep bills affordable until that burst of electrification comes, and show the benefit to the customer very clearly when we're making these investments.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I mean, if you look at, going back to the monitoring and management systems around ADMS, for example, it's a significant investment, and it takes a number of years to realize that investment or get a return on that investment. So what I see across every utility is really the need to get a more immediate return on investment by phasing those implementations so that every phase has a business case that stands on its own. It enables functionality that it saves, is more efficient or saves money for the utility and ultimately the customers. And that's the only way to fund programs that are multi-year, million-dollar investments. Yes. I think we're going to continue to make sure that we're and we keep that in the back of our minds in terms of every penny that is spent as an investment, the customer is expecting a return on that in a fairly timely fashion, as opposed to years and years.
Right. All these systems, ADMS is a wonderful system for us, but now we have to install 20,000 smart devices out in the field to make it even better. So the investment continues to create this digital grid. And that's one of the things, helping regulators understand that it's not just installing the system up front, but then how do you maintain it? A great example in the digital grid that concerns me is technology obsolescence, right? So we installed our AMI system using 3G. As I've tried to move to 4G and 5G, I'm getting pushback from my regulators saying, I don't understand why you need to do that. Well, I need to do it because I can't communicate with the devices out in the field. Technology moves so fast, it's not like a wood pole that we put in the ground that sits there for 60 years. the nature of the assets under the digital grid also changes. So the nature of how you think about the replacement cycle also has to change. That's a different paradigm for a lot of, not only our regulators, but also for the utilities. It's a different way of thinking about, I just installed this asset. I know it's now good for 7 years. I have to be thinking about the replacement cycle 4 years from now so I can have it replaced. It's going to bring different challenges than we've had before in dealing with the actual infrastructure we have in place.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. I mean, again, technology should not be driving the move to a digital grid, but you're absolutely right. It does, right? Yes. I mean, it does impact it significantly because we have to react to advancement in technology, to technology vendors coming up with new versions of software and new devices that really the utilities wants to make sure they're not in that reactive mode, but at the same time you no longer have the replacement cycle of 7 years or 10 years for a smart meter. That's much less. So you have to really plan out very well in terms of how you're going to get a return on your investment while managing a replacement cycle for technology.